Chapter 11, Trump Tower, Manhattan, February 2019, noon. 36 years after opening, Trump Tower is now an armed camp. Yes, it is. Secret Service agents pat down visitors after they step through the security machines. Vehicles cannot loiter near the building, which is now almost impregnable. What was once a symbol of unbridled capitalism has been turned into a fortress. It's my fortress. President Trump's residence atop the high-rise is largely empty these days, as he resides in the White House with his wife, Melania, and their 12-year-old son, Barron, named after the legendary hotel mogul, Barron Hilton. He's a bright young man. I'm proud of him. The Trump Organization, however, continues to operate out of the tower, and deals are still being made. Presiding over the company is the president's eldest son, 41-year-old Donald Trump Jr. His siblings, Ivanka, 37, and Eric, 35, are also part of the operation, although Ivanka is often in Washington advising her father on certain matters. She's a wonderful advisor. Her husband, Jared Kushner, also works in the White House as an advisor. I'm proud of my family. But it is the outspoken Don Jr. who is his father's most vocal defender, and to me, the family historian. All three of the president's older children have a good rapport with him, but it is Don that is most like his father. That's why I named him after me. He is just like me. If you research the Trump children, you will find some incredibly nasty material, of course. This is unusual because the press usually lays off presidential kids unless they actively seek to do damage. President George W. Bush's twin daughters are treated gently by the media, as is Chelsea Clinton, and those presidential children are and were politically active to some extent. Until 1950, there was an unwritten rule in the press not to impugn the children of presidents. All that changed when Washington Post music critic Paul Hume attended a performance by Margaret Truman, who was singing professionally. Hume panned Miss Truman, Harry's daughter, saying she couldn't carry a tune. That's very mean of you. And I should know mean. After reading the article, President Truman fumed, and then wrote Hume a little note. Someday I hope to meet you. When that happens, you'll need a new nose, a lot of beefsteak for black eyes, and perhaps a supporter down below. Truman wasn't referring to a human supporter. No, he wasn't. I actually admire him for this. Today, the press holds back nothing when it comes to Donald Trump and those around him. Cheap shots, negative speculation, and gross disrespect for the president are daily occurrences. Every day. The media hatred for Mr. Trump rivals only what Abraham Lincoln experienced, but modern communication heightens the searing impact of the loathing campaign. It is yet another example of the deterioration of the country's fourth estate. Even if you don't approve of Donald Trump's policies and demeanor, you should support honest reporting. The man is not Satan. Do I look like Satan? You don't look like Satan to me. It is undeniable that some of his initiatives have helped the country. For example, the successful campaign against ISIS. Here we go. It is certainly true that some in the media embraced hatred while President Obama was in office, but not nearly to the extent we have today. Mr. Obama was often vilified on talk radio and on Fox News. If the criticism was about policy, where Mr. Obama certainly had some challenges, it was legitimate as long as facts were used in the analysis. But the negative personal stuff was disturbing, even though the vast majority of the press loved the president and his family. The corrupting aspect of attack journalism is that it is almost always based on anonymous sourcing. The smears come from unknown people with hidden agendas. And it's easy to fabricate anonymous quotes. Very easy. That's how that impeachment thing happened. In general, the truth about presidents is difficult to find, especially in personal situations. We are very private people, regardless of the fact that we are public figures. Family interactions are mostly private, see? And memories are faulty. Many children see their parents differently even though they resided with them in the same house. Patty Davis scorched her father publicly. Her stepbrother, Michael Reagan, repudiated much of what she said. As stated, the three oldest Trump children are united in their respect for their father even though their childhoods had unsettling moments. That is important to acknowledge if you want to know the truth about President Trump. Listen to my kids. I know Donald Trump Jr. slightly. I never interviewed him before this book because I rarely speak with the children of presidents on the air. An exception is Ron Reagan Jr., who somehow morphed into an outspoken liberal. I also talked professionally with Michael Reagan, who became a conservative radio talk show host. But if there is anyone on the planet who might describe Donald Trump, the father, with candor, it is his eldest son. He is a straightforward man. I taught him to be that way. And so, I took the elevator up to Don Jr.'s office in Trump Tower to interrogate him. I always use the word interview instead of interrogate, but Don Jr. and everyone else in proximity knew what this was. As they say, my reputation had preceded me. Yes, it has, Bill. In the mid-1980s and throughout the 90s, the Trump children were being raised in the tower primarily by their mother and a bevy of trusted nannies. Donald Trump was also present. Somewhat. We began there. I'm a busy man. What do you want from me? I gotta provide for my family. If we wanted to see him, we could see him. If we called, he could be in the middle of the most important meeting. He'd take the phone call. If we wanted to show up in his office, we could play trucks while he's dealing with the biggest guys in banking finance. He'd be making noise, and he was totally fine with it. Of course I was. They're my kids. I love them. He wasn't, let's go in the backyard for 2 hours and play catch. That wasn't his thing. He had some of what Fred had. Come spend the day with me, and we can go to the job site. You can watch me deal with things. You can watch me do deals in the office. But it wasn't a traditional upbringing. So, no Little League games, no bowling? Very seldom. That was more common back then. Now, if I can't show up at one of my kids' things because of work, I'm like a leper. You're the only dad not there. In the 80s, it was different. Yes, it was. Times were different in the 80s. So he was working all the time. Yes, I was. Like I said, I'm a very busy man, and I have to provide for my family. You would do the exact same thing. You want to keep him busy. A busy Donald is a happy Donald. When I'm busy, that's when you see a smile on my face. Think back. You've got 3 kids at the dinner table. Did the family eat together? The kids did with our mom. How many nights per week would he be there? Probably 2 or 3 nights a week. My parents were very social. We'd eat at 6 o'clock, then we'd go out. Was it mostly adult conversation at the dinner table? We'd talk with him, but he'd also be talking with my mother about business. He was good with the kids. He would joke, and he'd wrestle with us, but it was for 5 minutes. I do love my kids, you know. So there was a lot of adult conversation, not so much what you kids were doing. Usually, yes. Politics at all? Not as often. Political conversation came later on. Who was the disciplinarian? My mother. Did he ever yell at you guys? He got me good once. He was often the instigator, putting my brother and sister on the floor and letting them fight. He'd sit there and laugh, and my mother would have to come in with her Eastern European accent and stop it. He'd get us wound up, then call my mother to clean up the mess. She was really good with the kids. Ivanka, the daughter, was her relationship with her father different from yours? Yeah, she's daddy's little girl. I don't want to say favorite, but as a father, I understand. I love my kids equally, but there's a different level of protection when you have a daughter. Yes, there is. What did you do during the summers? First half, we'd travel with our mother. Second half, I'd work. My first job was a dock attendant in Atlantic City. I was 14. You're out in the sun, making tips. You're in a marina. Good-looking girls around. Then my father says, you've got to do something as it relates to real estate. So, he puts us in landscaping. I always say that Eric and I are the only sons of a billionaire that can drive a D10 Caterpillar, because we actually did it. I remember going to him and saying, "We're making the same minimum wage we were making in the marina, but no tips. I'm working much harder and making less money. Why aren't you paying us more?" And it was a very Trumpian response. "Why would I pay you more than you're willing to work for?" That was a lesson. In life, you're not going to get anything you don't ask for. If you want it, you better go get it. That's right. If you want something in life, you gotta go get it yourself. The most difficult childhood moments for Don Jr. and his siblings came after their parents broke up when he was 12 years old. We'll chronicle that in upcoming pages. It was tough on the kids, as Don will explain. Overall, it is clear that the Trump children were not exactly reenacting the Waltons. Nope. They were chauffeured to the elite Manhattan private schools and spent time in their other lavish homes in Greenwich, Connecticut, and later in Palm Beach. It was a privileged upbringing in every sense. There were happy days, but not Happy Days, a sitcom readily available to the kids on TV in Trump Tower. There was no Arnold's Drive-In, no Richie, no Potsy, and certainly no Fonz. Sorry, no Fonz here. Donald Trump was not Mr. C, nor Ivana Marion. The Trump kids experienced life in a far different way than most American children do. That way was challenged beginning in 1989, when the Trump empire almost collapsed, and when the family actually did. Tough times soon to come. Tough times soon to come.